It's hard to stick to a promise these days, and from the looks of it, Great Britain's primary organization for cycling is no exception to that statement. We've got something that's shocking, yet not so shocking. British Cycling just signed a pretty big deal with the oil giant Shell, and, understandably, received a lot of backlash over its obviously hypocritical decision. We'll go through every single detail about British Cycling's new deal with Shell in today's video. First up, the hypocrisy of British Cycling, a deal with Shell despite environmental pledges. You know this one already. British Cycling just announced that they're going into an almost decade-long partnership with Shell, the multinational oil and gas corporation. Well, it's a pretty disappointing thing to hear. We all thought that British Cycling would stick to all these environmental pledges it's made, but it turns out sticking to its word isn't exactly its thing. You're all probably aware of how climate change has turned into a full-blown crisis at this point, and in light of that, you would think these big corporations and organizations would at least try to do better. But after this shocking news, it's safe to say we can't rely on them. The worst part about this entire deal is that British Cycling is hoping to work with Shell until 2030. That's a lot of time, and we can't even imagine how it's going to have incredibly devastating impacts on the environment. Up next, everything that Brian Facer has to say about this huge deal. If you didn't know, Shell's not exactly doing a great job with trying to reduce its greenhouse emissions, and from what we heard last time, British Cycling was trying its best to reach a goal of net zero emissions. When you put these two together, it's like mixing oil and water. Yeah, nothing about this deal makes any sense. Despite these obvious contradictions, the CEO of British Cycling, Brian Facer, seems to be pretty content with this deal. According to Facer, the two organizations will have a great time working side by side for the contracted 8 years. The CEO claims that this deal holds a lot of promise because it's going to help attract more people to the sport of cycling. What's more, he seems to believe that not only will this agreement help to provide access to the sport, but it will also let them achieve their goal of net zero emissions. Say what now? An oil giant that's the 9th largest producer of greenhouse gases is going to help British Cycling accomplish net zero emissions? Yeah, you've definitely got to be kidding. Not to mention the dark secrets of the petrochemical corporation. We're not really surprised by this news as much as we're shocked that British Cycling thinks a multinational oil corp will help them battle the climate crisis. For years, we've known that Shell's really not going to play its part in fighting climate change. Back in 1991, Shell itself conducted a study where the organization seemed to understand the implications of the climate crisis upon us. Despite that, they've never actually taken any concrete steps to do anything about their own contribution to the crisis. Shell truly has some audacity when you think of it, to do a report of its own and then not even pay any heed to its own warnings. When will these giant corporations learn to do better? From the looks of it, we can't expect any such thing from them. If anything, they're never changing. Moving on, all the green credentials British Cycling has to its name. But the thing is, even though we don't really expect Shell to own up to its actions, we all thought that British Cycling would, at least, be nothing like it. Well, we've been disappointed. We've seen the cycling agency work towards sustainability over the past few years. With all the work they'd done, we believed them to be truly dedicated to the environmental cause. They've always been such staunch supporters of public transport and recycling, and none of that has been just for show. You know how actions speak louder than words? Well, British Cycling always made sure that their actions were loud and clear. Let's take a detailed look at British Cycling's sustainability plans. Speaking of actions, let's briefly go over some of the British Cycling projects to achieve environmental sustainability. If it wasn't clear, they weren't treating the climate crisis as a joke. They were incredibly serious about it. Just the beginning of this year, British Cycling announced how it's going to reduce the size of its 150,000 membership packs. Now, some of you might be wondering what good came out of that, and worry not, we've got the answer for you. By making such a decision, the cycling agency was able to reduce a staggering amount of waste that was being produced due to all the extra paper and plastic. When we say staggering, we really do mean it. With this, the agency saved around 4.5 tons of plastic and paper waste. See, we told you, they showed genuine concern for environmental causes. On top of that, back in August of 2021, they joined hands with the British Association for Sustainable Sport. The entire goal was to create sustainability in sports. Following up, what British Cycling's commercial director had to say back then. The organization's commercial director, Darren Henry, explained back in 2021 that even though cycling is one of the most most sustainable sports out there, he felt that British cycling owed it to all the communities to continue to promote sustainability all the way through. The commercial director thought it was extremely necessary for them to set a good role model as a governing body by making sure all their business dealings promoted sustainability. When you're such a big sporting agency like British Cycling, you've got certain responsibilities, and from the looks of it, British Cycling never once shunned away from them. So it's truly tragic to see them sign a deal with Shell. Before, the agency made sure that all of its events took place in a way that least harmed the environment. Henry admitted that they've got plenty of work to do and that this was just the beginning. They had a long way to go, but now it doesn't seem to be that way. This Shell deal is definitely going to reverse all the good they've done for the environment. They might think it's a great initiative, but it's a big delusion. We can't even imagine how they're reconciling these contradictions in their own mission statement and the deal with Shell. Now for what Henry has to say about the deal with Shell. Well, we all know what Henry had to say back then. You must be wondering how he's trying to justify British Cycling's decision to go forward with this deal. We're here to tell you everything about it. So far, the commercial director is of the opinion that this deal's going to help the agency elevate the role that cycling plays in the thinking and actions of UK businesses. Well, let's see how that plays out. To us, it sounds like a pretty capitalistic approach and not even one bit sustainable. Shockingly, he also said that the Shell deal is going to play a big role in helping them promote cycling all across Britain. There's no end to the madness at play here, clearly. What's more, British Cycling's sustainable framework sounds like a big fat joke now. If you open the cycling agency's website, you're going to have to take a look at its sustainable framework section. Reading that section made us realize just how hollow the organization's actions have been. Basically, in that section, they've mentioned how they've made sustainability a priority because of how all communities are affected by the climate emergency we're dealing with. They even mentioned something about supporting clubs that promote sustainability in the long term. Well, we don't know anything about that, but this whole Shell ordeal, it's a far cry from being sustainable. Coming up, what major environmental groups have to say about this. Of course, you can't expect all the major environmental groups and activists to stay silent over a matter like this. Shell's a pretty big corporation, and considering how it's going to dominate the world of cycling now, it's important everyone raise their voice against this ridiculous deal. The entire deal's been condemned by Greenpeace, and the organization even released a statement calling the whole thing extremely absurd. That's the word right there. It truly is the most absurd thing on the planet. Jamie Peters, a campaigner from the Friends of the Earth, was surprised such a deal was even agreed to in the first place. According to him, cycling's an incredibly sustainable sport. It doesn't make any sense for British Cycling to join hands with Shell for achieving sustainability of all things. Last but not least, here's how people are reacting to British Cycling's blatant hypocrisy. The environmental groups aren't the only ones expressing their outrage with this decision. We had a whole crowd of cycling fans on Twitter and Facebook voicing out their anger at the cycling agency's extremely hypocritical decision. A lot of users wrote how they're no longer going to stay members of British Cycling. In light of these events, we think that's a pretty fair decision. One user even went as far as to call this one of the biggest failures in history. And to be honest, we kind of agree with them there. What's more, people are calling the whole deal ethically abominable and saying that such blatant greenwashing by British Cycling is an extremely reprehensible thing at this point. Well, we agree with that too. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think of British Cycling's 8-year-long deal with Shell? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.